Morning. This is David Neese with EV World, where we bring the latest on electric vehicle technology and with everything green that's going on. And the news we provide is for entertainment purposes only. I want to welcome Bill Moore here with me today. How's it going, Bill?
It is going great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Always good to be here. We're broadcasting from sunny Omaha. So,
Yeah.
sunny Omaha. Yeah. Anyways, we're gonna get right into it. We got kind of a funny little thing to review here. A little video by Sean Burke. See
Who
what
is a British comedian, by the way. So,
Job done. I just planted a tree while wearing a hard hat. You see, here at Snake Oil, we're doing our bit. The same way we might kiss you on the forehead, or choking you to death. We're putting the con back in conscience, as the majority of our marketing features green energy, while the minority of our investments employ it. But look, we know what bikes are. Now gaze upon these crisp video clips of renewable energy sources, proving once and for all that we are investing heavily in stock footage. Oh. We're also planning to invest in carbon capture technology that we just sort of hope will exist one day. Which is why we're also planning to invest in magic wands, genie lamps, and wishing wells. You see, we're just like you. You love 80s nostalgia? We do too. Because that's when we knew about climate change, but didn't have to do anything about it. Good times. I know you're worried about climate change, but you can take my word for it. We will be okay. We will be okay. You're fucked. We just posted record profits. You just moved into your mom's shed. Let's just hope her love is renewable.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I'll
yeah,
be damned.
Well,
yeah, yeah.
that's quite the
Well, the thing is, too,
well
is
done.
that, yeah, the people that have commented on that, have noted how sadly accurate that is because, most of these oil companies. At one time, did you know that BP meant Beyond Petroleum?
Beyond.
Beyond Petroleum. Yes, BP used to mean Beyond Petroleum in one of their ad campaigns pushing for green technology. And since then, basically, they've all retrenched and gone back to let's make money, instead of thinking about the future of our kids. So it was fun to see Sean's video, and I felt I got to share this. So,
Well, BP cleaned up their act after the big oil spill in the Gulf of
oh, did,
Mexico.
oh,
They had
did
to
they?
buy, yeah, they renamed all their gas stations from BP to Marathon. And so that way that it really did fix the problem. I mean,
Yeah, yep.
so they didn't have to deal with that anymore.
You can do wonders with the ad dollar,
Well, at the start of the
to go green.
yeah. Well, if you remember at the start of the coronavirus, Corona beer sales were down 30% for like 6 months.
Oh,
And I don't know. I think people were just trying to be funny. I'm not
yeah,
so sure that they were really serious about it, but people, honest to God, had,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
stopped buying Corona beer. And that was funny. Which was really odd was because alcohol sales were really up during that period
Oh, yeah,
because people
absolutely.
were staying
Yeah,
at home.
staying at home.
Anyways.
Yep, drinking their worries away.
Yeah. So next, we're going to talk about electric vehicle regulations and
Yeah.
laws a little bit. Probably not as exciting as the last little bit, but it's still
Well, it's important because this does also come down to money. Because in those legislation, whether they're at the state level or the federal level, and we're speaking obviously here about the United States, even though we may have a global audience, is that the legislation being written and being either discussed or passed and made into law, the whole purpose is to encourage people to find a way to economically justify their transition away from fossil fuels, over fossil fuel burning automobiles over to electric cars, and other modes of transportation. It doesn't have to necessarily always be about car ownership. It can be things that encourage more sustainable building bike lanes for your community and things like that. So these guys really did a great job, Clean Technica, in bringing together all of the various federal laws and state, policy and regulations that will impact this transition, to try to encourage that transition. So I wanted to post that because I felt it was important for everybody to see what's going on. I mean, another story that I posted this morning is that if you live in Colorado and you meet certain conditions, you can get a Tesla for less than $15,000 out of pocket expense.
Wow.
And that's all because of these regulations and policies that are being enacted on a either state by state basis or on a national federal level.
How did that math work out?
Well,
Was it a used Model 3 over $25,000 with the federal $4,000
yeah,
and then a
you'll
big
have to, yeah,
Colorado?
I did not delve too deeply in it because I had obviously a deadline to get on the air here with you. So I thought,
Yeah, no, I understand that.
yeah,
I
I'll
may
post
do
it,
a separate
but
video about that.
there have been other stories, over the last several weeks here that are showing that Colorado is doing a lot to encourage people to get rid of that gas guzzler and go over to electric.
Well, let's look at a couple of these new laws here, and this is here on cleantechnica.com. Let me see. We got this Advanced Clean Cars 2. See here. Builds on the Advanced Clean Cars rule passed in 2012. Decreases emissions by increasing EV sales via two programs: a zero emission vehicle program and low emission vehicle program. Let's see.
And
This is
some of
really
these are done, to encourage commercial fleets. There's one advanced clean fleet, to encourage businesses to either, go to electric vehicles or to install electric vehicle charging infrastructure. But it's
so.
surprising the number of measures that are out there.
Oh, there are. There's no question. I've spent a fair amount of time researching electric vehicle rebates in
Yeah,
all 50 states, and you have different rebates for cars, sometimes for SUVs, larger vehicles. Some are different if it's a hybrid or plug-in hybrid. And then you'll a lot of times have some for motorcycles, and
yep,
then you'll have ones for the charging stations. Like where we live in Nebraska, the only incentives are actually for installing the charging stations in your garage. So I haven't found anything outside of just charging here, and kind of the same in Florida. Well, it's almost all related to the charging stations. But then when you get to California and you can get $7,500, well, you can get the $7,500 federal rebate anywhere if you have enough
right.
battery components made in the United States or in there's like 20 other countries. And then, but in California, tax another, I believe it's $5,000 onto that. So it really starts making some of the cars really quite affordable when
Yep.
you start doing that. And now some of the federal incentives and some state incentives are also dealing with used cars too. So they're making an even bigger incentive to adopt in the used side.
Yeah.
And
In fact, there was a couple of stories this morning that I posted to the RSS stream showing that the Tesla model, I think it's the Tesla Model S, now qualifies for, as a used car, now qualifies for the $4,000 used car, electric car tax credit.
let's see here. Yeah, none of these really go real in depth on these, but it
No,
talks about the
no,
Inflation
this
Reduction
is,
Act, very quick skim. Um, so let's see here. The EPA new standards for 2027 for light and medium duty vehicles. Let's see. Reduce vehicle emissions by 8,000 billion metric tons. Let's see. 51% reduction in projected fleet average greenhouse emission targets. from the 2026 standards. So they want to do this by 2032, a 51% reduction in
Yeah.
fleet greenhouse gas emissions. That gives us 9 years.
Well, that would possibly impact, the company the local company here doing the conversion of the freight liners.
Freightliners,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And
It
I
came as a total
probably,
surprise to me. I had no idea that there was a company here in Omaha attempting to do something like that.
I will eventually interview the CEO of that company of Principal Solar and discuss that because the Principal Solar owns that local company.
Yeah,
Um, let's see here. The EPA's greenhouse gas emission standards for heavy duty vehicles. Let's
yeah.
see. There's not much of a breakdown, just that
Ah,
these are kind of going on here. But anyways, there are obviously lots of regulations coming along, and we'll get into that a little further another day. Because
yeah,
I know you really wanted to talk about e-bikes and
yeah. That. You know, I have been riding e-bikes now for well past 20 years. I think I got my first e-bike in like 2000, 1999 or 2000 or something like that. Um, and I literally got a text message yesterday from my brother who is retiring from a career with in the airline industry, asking me about what electric bike he should look for.
nice.
Which was pleasant surprise because that he's only now starting to think about that, and so there are efforts being made, incentives being made to encourage people to think beyond the car, because most of the trips that we travel on a day by day basis can be done easily on a bicycle, to be honest, particularly an electric bicycle, because most trips that we take, I think, was 80 something percent of all trips are under 2 miles. It's
Oh,
it's
wow.
some number, like could be 5 miles. I don't remember exactly what the cutoff is, but that's 5 miles. I take my bike, I go over to the trail over here, I ride around the trail around the lake and back is exactly 5 miles, and it takes me half an hour, of nice, pleasant driving if I don't run into the mountain lion that we have
Yeah,
prowling,
it's so funny.
prowling the neighborhood. You know that because you're not that far from me.
Yeah, it keeps popping up at 114th and Q on the same person's Ring doorbell
Yeah,
camera. And so I don't know if they're putting cat food out for it or whatever, but it's definitely a full-size mountain lion.
that's
The
a full size
theory is
mountain lion. Yeah,
that it's a
but
male that got chased out of its territory by a younger male.
probably.
And so
So
it came to Omaha.
yeah, yeah, so so that 5 miles on an electric bike is a piece of cake. I can run down to the Hy-Vee down here and back. It's not quite 4 miles, but it's all a really nice ride. So I don't have to take the car. I don't have to pile my hundred and well, I won't say I'm not 100 and some pounds anymore. Um, my 200 plus pounds. I don't have to put it in my 2,400 pound car or my 5,000, 6,000 pound, 4-pack pickup truck to drive down to buy a gallon of milk, right?
Right.
There are much more sensible ways of doing that. So I'm really encouraged to see that that policymakers are recognizing that and encouraging, providing incentives for people to take a look at electric bicycles. There's a federal, it's not enforced yet, it's been introduced, but there are state incentives. For example, in Colorado, there's a program there that every time they introduce it, immediately they sell out of those credits. So it's an area that I'm really excited to see starting to mature and starting to develop.
So
Um,
let's talk about this a little bit. The Electric
sure.
Bike Incentive Kickstart for the Environment, or E-Bike Act, proposes a tax credit that would cover 30% of the cost of a new electric bike,
Yep.
with a maximum credit of $1,500. Yeah, 30% is pretty good. You know, I've never ridden an e-bike. Okay. I have
You have to
rid,
come over here then.
well, but I've done tens of thousands of, I don't know. I don't know how many thousands of miles I've ridden on a regular bike,
Sure.
but it was all for exercise. And
Yeah.
I do spin classes several days a week. So I'm, I'm not opposed to putting my own power into a bike, kind of
Right.
thing. And
And
so,
that's great.
yeah, so that's been a different need just because of my, you know,
Well, see, here's
amount
what
I
I want.
exercise.
Here's what I want to stress, because the people that oftentimes don't understand what an electric bike is for, they think, well, they're just trying to cheat on their exercise, right? That's not the way I see an electric bike. I see an electric bike as an alternative to an automobile for many of the tasks, many of the missions that we have to do on a weekly or a daily basis. It's yeah. If you can ride a push bike, more power to you. I did it for years and years and years and years too.
Right.
But then I got to the point to where I wanted I yeah, I can still, there have been laboratory tests, and I actually helped the University of Nebraska at Omaha conduct such a test, and that found that you're going to get almost the same amount of exercise on an electric bike that you do on a regular push bike, except when you get my age and you got aging knees, right?
Hmm.
And you don't have the stamina that you once had. Um, You'll do one of two things. You'll stop riding a bike and it'll collect dust in your garage, or you'll
Right.
decide to take an electric bike and you'll decide to use that in place of the car. And yeah, I'll get some exercise out of it. But you know what? I didn't have to take the car to go down 2 miles to Hy-Vee to buy a dozen eggs or whatever I'm going down there for. So I want people, I'm hoping that people begin to think about these things, not just for exercise, because yes, you are going to get it, but to
Oh,
also
yes.
think about it as a replacement for an automobile for those trips where you don't need, you look at automobiles and you see people driving around, there's always, almost invariably, one person, just one
Well,
person.
so one of the issues I see, and this is something when I've had people come to visit me to look at real estate from other countries, has been how large our automobiles are here.
Oh
So
yeah.
that they're not used to seeing full-size pickup trucks or Suburbans or Tahoes and Expeditions and things like that. And those size vehicles are super common here.
Oh yeah.
And if you go to some major cities in the United States, you almost don't even see pickup trucks. So, like if you go to Washington, D.C. or LA, you don't see pickup trucks as much. But in this part of the country, you see the larger vehicles. And I think this is one of the problems actually with adoption in a lot of the electric vehicle segment in the United States is that people like larger vehicles, and the larger vehicles are where the price premiums tend to be in the electric vehicle space, whereas the vehicles like we were talking about earlier, the ones that are more affordable and that really are super attractive when you add in the rebates, tend to be the smaller vehicles. And I think even here, I look at the lack of use that disappoints me on the Bellevue, Nebraska bicycle lanes along Fort Crook.
Hmm.
And it's like I've almost never seen anybody even use
No.
them to the point where they took them out.
Yeah.
And it was sad. It was awesome to see it happen, but it's sometimes it's just hard. You've got to find ways to make people trend to make it normal to ride a bicycle to the store or an e-bike to work. And that's the fight, is getting people to understand that it can be normal and safe, so that there's more than one issue there.
My wife, we went down to Lowe's. They had some material down there that I wanted to purchase, some barbecue pellets, because those
Hmm.
barbecue pellets happen to make a really nice substrate for growing mushrooms. And I'm beginning to experiment with gourmet mushroom cultivation. So I went into the garden center. As I was walking out the garden center, I noticed that there's a really nice electric bike parked there. It was chained to the fence around the garden center. So I asked the lady, well, who is that? She says, well, that's one of the employees here. That's what he rides to work. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic, right? And then I went over to what was it, a month or so ago, to a Hy-Vee. I think it was Hy-Vee, and it's the same thing there. That she has an electric bike. She loves her electric bike. I think she lives in sort of where your neighborhood is, but she works, down on the Shadow Lake Hy-Vee, and she just didn't feel comfortable riding an electric bike, although there is a good bike lane. So a lot of this just simply has to do with our reprioritizing where we build our infrastructure. And of course, what that generally means is taking space away from cars and giving it back to bicycles. Most people don't realize that the reason we began to pave roads in cities was to provide a surface, and between cities was to provide a solid surface for the bicycle riders of the late 1890s. It was the
Oh,
bicyclist
wow.
organizations that began to pressure them because they didn't want to ride these dusty, often muddy roads that went between towns. So they began to organize. This is the American Cyclist Organization or something like that. Began to pressure them and say, we want these roads paved so we can ride our bicycles, around town and out into the countryside. That's how we began to pave the roads. And then, of course, once we began to get paved roads, well, that just paved the way for Henry Ford and the Model T and all those cars. And so then that grew. So gradually, what started off as something to encourage cycling in the 1880s and the 1890s eventually gave way to our, 10-lane wide superhighways for automobiles and trucks.
Well, the 1890s were sort of the golden age of transportation. I remember seeing something about somebody saying that transportation was never going to get any more. It was never going to advance as fast as it had in the 1800s
Oh, yeah.
because they had the powered railroads and steamships, and they invented the Zeppelins,
Yep.
and so they had air travel in balloons, and they had invented the bicycle, and the bicycle was improving, and all of this. And then of course, like, it was after this was said, it was like 3 or 5 years later. It might have been 1898, something like that, when somebody famous said this. And like 5 years later, the Wright brothers are launching an airplane, and then the
Yeah.
next thing you know, cars are everywhere.
And
And
remember what their original business was?
bicycles, wasn't
Bicycles.
it? Yes.
Exactly. And of course, a lot of the early pilots, and Glenn Curtis, for example, was a motorcycle racer, and all those motorcycles were bicycles that they'd hung, gasoline engines on. Speaking of steam, ran my pressure cooker for the first time yesterday,
Hmm.
and I had to pasteurize this material I was making, and I really got a good lesson in the power of steam, because once I turned the power off, the heat off, and then finally, pulled the little control plug off the top of it, that steam shot out of there, and I immediately thought, oh my God, now I understand why steam was so important as a power source. You just don't think about that. But once you see that shooting out of there with such force, you begin to say, well, now I know why it was so revolutionary a technology in the 1800s. Hey, we're really going long here again.
Yes, we are. We are.
Apologize to people to get me started and I start blabbing on. So
That's okay. Well, we covered all of our topics for today, anyways, Bill. As always, it's been a pleasure, and I want to remind people,
subscribe and ring the
like
bell.
subscribe, and ring the bell. Yes. So, anyways, that gives us a little extra there. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and end the stream for today. We appreciate everybody
Okay.
listening.